بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي قلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباكي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحتق العصم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا كانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لكبائه ساترا ولا لشيء من عمل القبيح بالحسن مبدلا خيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فادح من البلاء أقلته وكم من عثار وكيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وكسرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد آمالي وخدرتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي. يا سيدي فأسألك برحمتك ألا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفيه ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي وكن لهم وبعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا إلهي ورب من لي خيرك وأسأله كشف ذري والنذر في أمري إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكم اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أحوى وأسعده على ذلك الكذا فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك وخالفت بعد أوامرك فلك الحجة على في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه كذا وألزمني حكمك بلاغك لقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك اللهم فقبل عذري وارحم شدة ذري وفكني من شد وثاقي يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي يا إلهي وسيدي وربي أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد من توى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهجابه لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيته أو تبعد من أدنيته أو تشرد من آويته أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدة وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة وبشكرك مادحة وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة ولا جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة ما حكى الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا ربي وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكسوح يسير مكروه كثير مدته فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مكانه ولا يخفف عن أهله لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها أذج وأبكي لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهلها بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك وهبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي أفوق فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآملين ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين يا غياث آمل العارفين يا غياث المستغيثين يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين ويا إله العالمين أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وذاك طعم عذابه بمعصيته وحبس بين أتباكها بجرمه وجريرته وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يامل فضلك ورحمتك أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه أم كيف يتقلقل بين أتباكها وأنت تعلم صدقه أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا ربه أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك فباليقين أقدع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك وكذيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين أن تجلد فيها المعاندين وأن تجل ثناؤك قلت مبتدأ وتطولت بالعنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أظهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيته وبفضلك سترته وأن توفر حظي من كل خير تنسله، أو إحسان تفضله، أو بر تنشره، أو رزق تبسطه، أو ذنب تغفره، أو خطأ تستره. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رزقي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بذري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاكتي. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة، وبخدمتك موصولة، وأعمالي عندك مقبولة، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا، وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، كو على خدمتك جوارحي، واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين، وأسرع إليك في المبادرين، وأشتاك إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وأخافك مخافة الموقنين، وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرده، ومن كادني فكده، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نسيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك، وجد لي بجودك، وعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقلنا عثرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك كذيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا رب نسبت وجهي، وإليك يا رب مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني مناي، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا، اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء، يا من اسمه دواء، يا ذكره شفاء، يا طاعته غنى، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء، وسلاحه البكاء. يا سابغ النعم، يا دافع النقم، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلم، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد، وافعل بي ما أنت أهله. وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله، وسلم تسليما كثيرا.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين عليا ولي الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين عليا حجة الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه هيا على الصلاة هيا على الصلاة هيا على الفلاح هيا على الفلاح هيا على خير العمل هيا على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. عن فاطمة الزهراء عليها السلام بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله قال: سمعت فاطمة أنها قالت: دخل علي أبي رسول الله في بعض الأيام فقال: السلام عليك يا فاطمة. فقلت: عليك السلام. قال: إني أجد في بدني ضعفا. فقلت له: أعيذك بالله يا أبتاه من الضعف. فقال: يا فاطمة ائتيني بالكساء اليماني فغطيني به. فأتيته بالكساء اليماني فغطيته به، وصرت أنظر إليه وإذا وجهه يتلأله كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسن قد أقبل وقال: السلام عليك يا أماه. فقلت: عليك السلام يا كرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال: يا أماه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها راية جد رسول الله. فقلت: نعم إن جدك تحت الكساء. فأقبل الحسن نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا جداه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أدخل معك تحت الكساء؟ فقال: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوضي قد أذنت لك. فدخل معه تحت الكساء. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسين قد أقبل وقال: السلام عليك يا أماه. فقلت: عليك السلام يا ولدي ويا كرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال لي: يا أماه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت: نعم إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء. فذن الحسين نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا جداه والسلام عليك يا من اختار الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكما تحت الكساء؟ فقال: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب ويا شافع أمتي قد أذنت لك. فدخل معهما تحت الكساء. فأقبل عند ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال: السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال: يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأن راية أخي وابن عم رسول الله. فقلت: نعم ها هو مع ولديك تحت الكساء. فأكمل علي نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال له: عليك السلام يا أخي ويا وسيي وخليفتي وصاحب لوائك قد أذنت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء. ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت: السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال: وعليك السلام. قال: وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بذعتي قد أذنت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء. فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخذ برسول الله بطرفي الكساء وأومى بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي، لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي، يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم. أنا حرب لمن حاربهم، وسلم لمن سالمهم، وعدو لمن عاداهم، ومحب لمن أحبهم. إنهم مني وأنا منهم. فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم، وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فقال الله عز وجل يا ملائكتي ويا سكان السماوات إني ما خلقت سماء مبنيا ولا أرضا مدحيا ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئا ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال أمين جبرائيل يا رب ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة، هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فقال جبرائيل يا رب أتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض ليكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله نعم قد أذنت لك. فحبت أمين جبرائيل وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله. العلي الأعلى يكرك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئة ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحر يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم، وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم فهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله إنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء فقال لي بإن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فقال علي لأبي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واستفاني برسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي إذا والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال النبي ثانيا يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واستفاني برسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا وفيهم محموم إلا وفرج الله أمحما ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. فقال علي إذا والله فزنا وسعدنا، وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات. اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد. آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے. جب بچھا گھر میں فرش عزا، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے. رش کے جنت ہوا گھر میرا، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے. کون سجدوں کی زینت بناتا تجھے، کون جنت کی جنت بناتا تجھے، کون جنت کی جنت بناتا تجھے. اے زمیں کر ادا شکریہ، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے. ایک الجھن تھی پہچانوں کیسے اسے، کس کو دیکھوں کہ خالق سمجھ آ سکے، کس کو دیکھوں کہ خالق سمجھ آ سکے. ہو گیا حل میرا مسئلہ، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے. زوم نکلے گا سچائیوں کا بھی، ہار مانے گی قوم نصارا بھی، ہار مانے گی قوم نصارا بھی. پل میں ہو جائے گا فیصلہ، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے. پہلے ہی اس کو جلدی شہادت کی تھی، آخری سانس اور تیز چلنے لگی، آخری سانس اور تیز چلنے لگی. جب یہ مقتل میں حر نے سنا، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے. مثل نہج بلاغہ جو نقطے سنے، لہجہ مرتضیٰ میں جو خطبے سنے، لہجہ مرتضیٰ میں جو خطبے سنے. بنت زہرا کو دینے دعا، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے، آ گئے پنجتن آ گئے. روز محشر کے منصب ہیں آل ابا، فیصلے ان کو کرنے ہیں میری جگہ، فیصلے ان کو کرنے ہیں میری جگہ، حشر میں خود کہے گا خدا، آ گئے پنجے تن آ گئے، آ گئے پنجے تن آ گئے، آ گئے پنجے تن آ گئے، اکبر و قاسم و زینب و با وفا، ساتھ سرور کے پہنچا جو یہ قافلہ، ساتھ سرور کے پہنچا جو یہ قافلہ، برملا کہہ اٹھی کربلا، آ گئے پنجے تن آ گئے، آ گئے پنجے تن آ گئے، آ گئے پنجے تن آ گئے، میری نسبت ہے اعلان تطہیر سے، بولی آیت کے جلدی سے لے چل مجھے، بولی آیت کے جلدی سے لے چل مجھے، دیکھ جبریل زیر کسا، آ گئے پنجے تن آ گئے، 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 بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات، اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد۔
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Respected scholar, my elders, brothers, sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all the names listed on the screen and Kul Marhamin al-Fatiha. Ayyama Yujibun is requested for all the names listed on the screen and whoever is in need of it here and elsewhere. Let us all recite it together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu su. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu su. أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
On the joyous occasion of Eid Mubarak, on behalf of the Managing Committee and Board of Trustees, we wish you all Kushari Mubarak. On this joyous occasion, the Managing Committee is pleased to record and announce the engagement of Fayaz, son of Shaista and Imran Virani of Orlando, to Roshane Fatima, daughter of Razia and Muhammad Jafar of Toronto, Canada. On behalf of the community and management, we would like to congratulate the families and pray to Almighty to shower His blessing on the couple. Ameen. Par Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad salawat.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. والصلاة والسلام التحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين المكرمين الخيرين الفاضلين، سيما بقية الله في الأرضين، روحي وأرواح العالمين للتراب مقدمه الفدا، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Eid Mubarak to all of you, from our family to yours. So tonight we have, this will be our last session, since Muharram will be starting next week, inshallah. So we'll be, you'll have these other speakers come for these next few weeks. So what I wanted to do tonight is wrap up the discussion that we've been going through so far. And then if we get time at the end, mention a few points related to Eid Mubahila. And then if we have any questions, we'll take questions from Slido, and then we can move on to our quiz, inshallah. For the past few months, we've been talking about building and adopting an Islamic lifestyle. And we realize that the only way that's possible is if we can figure out first if Islam is something that's full-time or part-time. Does Islam actually tell us and give us commandments, rules, and things for us to do for all different parts of our life? Or is it limited to just a few things? The first part of this discussion was about going through the history to figure out, where did this first question come up? Where did this question first come up in history? When did people start questioning the role of religion in our lives? So we were honing in on European history, because we said before that, for all people of all civilizations, generally speaking, religion was seen to be the way of life for everybody, a complete way of life. All answers came through religion. We saw then in the history of Europe, from the Dark Middle Ages, they begin abandoning religion and switching to something else. The scientific revolution comes along, the Enlightenment. People begin to substitute God and religion and their scholars, their clergy, for other things like math, like human reasoning and science. The Industrial Revolution comes around, and people recognize that maybe they don't need religion to, be a part of their lives anymore. And in the modern age, it's not just that people started to abandon it completely, but they start to talk about how it's the bane of human existence, that it's actually keeping humanity backwards. It's not allowing humans to progress. We talked about how in the second part of the modern era, people then began to say, or some began to realize that, hey, I think maybe we need something beyond science, beyond human reason, because it's clear we can't answer all the questions with these methods. So we talked about the limitations of science. We talked about the problematic conclusions if all you use is the scientific method. And basically what we concluded was that that science or a human reason needs something else. We need religion, we need God, we need philosophy, we need metaphysics, we need ethics. We need something beyond this simple scientific method, the empirical method. We need something beyond mathematics and something beyond human reason, which comes from revelation from God. After all this, we said that there are two trends now that from this. See, the modern era is pretty much, we're in it, but we're also out of it too. There's two trends that we are living in right now, or three trends if you want, but two major trends where people who recognize the limitations of science and math and human reasoning, they splintered off into two groups. So I want to mention those two trends, those two groups tonight, inshallah, and then the actual discussion, the topic that's left over, will continue when we reconvene after Muharram, inshallah. So what are these two trends? The first is you have these academics, these philosophers, these thinkers. They're following the trend in history, how things have been progressing. They said, okay, first people were using God and religion, and then after we started using other things like human reason and science, we recognized that we don't need God anymore. Na'udhu billah, we don't need religion. Those things are fake, they're mythology, they're a bunch of ideas that human beings made up, right? Stories. So we toss those aside. But then they started to think deeper. They said, hey, well, human reason doesn't really get us anywhere either, and nor does science because of the limitations, because of all the inherent problems. So they said, you know what? Science can't lead us to truth either. Human reason can't lead us to truth. So the conclusion that some came to is that after modernism, there's a new phase. The phase we're living in now is called post-modernism, or the postmodern era. Another word for it is the post-truth era. And what's sort of the main idea here? The main idea is that we have no truth. There is no truth. There is no reality. There's nothing objective. The only way to get, the only thing that we can be certain of is what I want. I'm certain of what I want and how I feel. So what I'll do is I'm going to go and use that, use force, use power, use structures, use systems, and make sure people do what I want. Because science is not going to tell you the truth, so we can't go by scientific ideas. Human reason won't work anymore. And definitely they don't believe in religion. So they say, look, there is no such thing as some sort of truth or falsehood. What we can do then is just make it up as we go along. So if I feel like I am one gender one day and then another gender another day, well, I can say whatever I want. It's not a big deal. We start bending things according to our will, according to our own likes and our dislikes. And this is the era which is called the postmodern era. Right now, when people talk about this idea of critical theory or identity politics or let's say intersectionality, all these fancy terms that you hear sometimes talked about in the media, whether it's left or right wing, you hear these kind of common phrases that, do what you feel, do what you want, do what you know is right. Be true to yourself, live your truth, be authentic. Or you talk about alternative facts and alternative reality. Follow your heart, follow your gut. All of this is just nonsense, which is the result of the postmodern type of thinking. Because for them, there's no truth outside of what you and I want. If I want, for example, to believe that right now it's daytime, then you can't stop me from that. If I want to believe that I'm a 5-year-old girl, you can't stop me from believing that. If I'm the president of a country and I believe that in my inaugural address, it was the most attended inaugural address in history, I can believe that. As long as I can convince everybody else to believe it, to believe my lies, to believe my truth, then that's what makes something true. It is the most dangerous philosophy that can ever exist because it leads to pure and utter chaos. There's no truth except what you can force people to believe. And this is very important for us in this age because we're living in this age. And a lot of the ideas or movements or slogans and hashtags and all of these things that innocently or naively sometimes you and I follow because we think we're standing up for something that has to do with justice or social justice or supporting the oppressed, behind it sits a very dangerous and destructive ideology. We need to be extra careful in these times. And the Quran has pointed out in one general way this sort of idea. And I think we are familiar with this verse, right? But maybe not the full extent of it. In Surah Al-Jathiyah, chapter 45, verse 23, Allah says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أفرأيت من اتخذ إلهه هواه. Have you seen the person who has made their hawa, their desires, their ilah, their God? Have you seen the person which has taken their own carnal self, their own wants their own desires, whatever they think is good, that's what they've made God. In a sense, that's postmodernism in a nutshell. And it's funny because this is exactly what, do you remember Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher we mentioned before? Some say that when he said, for example, na'udhu billah, that God is dead, what he meant was that God is dead because all of the thinkers in the modern era killed him, because of the fake ideas that they brought up, because of relying on science, because of relying on human reason. He said the natural conclusion is you've created a world where people will not have any access to truth anymore. You need something beyond the self, beyond reason, beyond science. And now you see what's going on in this day and age. So many of us have heard that part of the verse before, right? You know, have you seen the person who's taken their low desire, their desires as their God? It's the other parts which I think are very important. It continues, وَأَضَلَّهُ اللَّهُ عَلَىٰ عِلْمٍ. And Allah has misguided them, right? Has done dalala, has made them go away from ilm, from having knowledge. It's almost literally verbatim what postmodernists say. They say, follow your own desires, and then there is no truth. Now, Allah is saying, when you follow your own desires, then I will take you away from the truth. See, of course, these postmodernists can't put two and two together, unfortunately. وَخَتَمَ عَلَى سَمْعِهِ وَقَلْبِهِ. Allah puts a seal. He closes off their hearts, so their ears and their hearts. Meaning, even if you try to tell them that, hey, you guys don't make any sense. This postmodernism stuff doesn't make any sense. Don't you think that, something like 2 + 2 = 4 is true, or your own existence is true, or that there has to be a higher reality? Like, there's obvious things which are true. You can't completely deny science. Don't completely deny math or basic obvious ideas. But because now they've made their own desires, their own nafs, they've made it their God, they have basically set it up so that now they don't have access to truth anymore. They're blind, they're deaf, and they're dumb towards the truth. Allah continues, وَجَعَلَ عَلَى بَصَرِهِ غِشَاوَةً. And then over their eyes, God puts a covering. You show them the plain truth, and because there's something covering their eyes, they won't see it because they're blinded. فَمَنْ يَهْدِيهِمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ اللَّهِ أَفَلَا تَذَكَّرُونَ. So after all of this, who can help somebody who's stuck in this sort of predicament besides or after Allah? Meaning, this sort of disease is so bad, it's almost like nobody except Allah can help this kind of individual out. This is such a dangerous ideology, right? So now Allah's reminding them and He's reminding us, because this is a stepping stone for us that we have to be careful of. Shaitan jumps on us to follow our own desires first and makes us rationalize and think that we're doing, right, something logical or something reasonable or something Islamic. We have to be very, very careful. In the same way, we don't want to be modernists who are just blindly following human reasoning or scientific ideas. Postmodernism itself and the idea of not believing in any truth, following this idea of structures and intersectionality and group ideas and individual identities and all these nonsense notions. You and I need to be very careful that we don't get caught up in their trap and we don't get caught up in their false ideas. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So this was the first sort of trend. It's people recognize that science couldn't solve their problems, math wouldn't solve problems, human reason doesn't solve all the problems. And they said that, you know what, then I'm just going to follow my own beliefs. I'm going to use my force, my power. I'm going to be the loudest person and I'll get what I want. This is postmodern thinking and a postmodern approach to reality. And don't think it's just philosophers who do this, right? It's sometimes you and I, we get stuck being the loudest people, for example, let's say on social media, complaining to, let's say, community members. And sometimes we get caught up thinking that the loudest person is speaking on behalf of the truth. No, be careful. Just because somebody is loud and they're forceful and they're aggressive and passionate doesn't mean that they speak on behalf of Islam. Doesn't mean that they speak on behalf of the truth. So we have to be very, very careful that we don't get caught up in their nonsense. Now, what is the other trend? The other trend, well, the other two trends. So one trend was that There are, of course, some thinkers who don't think there's a problem with modernism. And we've already talked about how there are issues, following human reason blindly or following science blindly is going to lead you into problems. So some have stuck with modernism. And again, some of us are stuck in that mode. And a lot of academics and a lot of thinkers are still stuck like that. So right now, in the academic world, there's this battle between what we say modernists and postmodernists fighting for truth. And we, what we would call ourselves pre-modernists, people who believe in religion, who believe in higher powers, who believe in revelation and everything, we're kind of caught in the crossfire when we should be looking back towards God. Some individuals, though, they have emerged out of this battle honestly, humbly, sincerely, recognizing that they messed things up. And they said, you know what? This sort of obedience and blind obedience and faith and dependency and trust on science was misplaced. Thinking that my human intellect can solve problems, that's also misplaced. You know what? We shouldn't have abandoned religion in the first place. We have to go back to religion. We need to go back to God. We need to go back to philosophy. We need to go back to morality and ethics. We need to go back to metaphysics. Let's take a step back because those societies were much better off. That sort of thinking was grounded in truth and reality. So now that's why you see so many individuals now turning back and going towards some religion. We see this same thing alluded to in the Quran as well, this sort of trend. This is in chapter 5, Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 54. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا من يرتد منكم عن دينه فسوف يأتي الله بقوم يحبهم ويحبونه أذلة على المؤمنين أعزة على الكافرين يجاهدون في سبيل الله ولا يخافون لوم لائم ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله واسع عليم. Says, hey, mu'mineen, listen up. Whoever has left the deen, whoever has left their religion and their deen, don't worry, soon you will see that Allah will replace them with another people. So first he's saying that Allah already knows there's going to be people who follow religion and then all of a sudden they abandon it. They abandon their faith and they abandon their religion. Then Allah says a replacement's going to come. Another qawm, another group of people is going to come and they have very specific characteristics now. First, yuhibbuhum, meaning Allah loves them, wa yuhibbunahu, and they love Allah. Adillatan ala al-mu'minin. They're humble when it comes in regards to the mu'mineen. A'izzatin ala al-kafirin. They have this dignity and honor, and they are, they stand against the kuffar, those who are standing against the truth. Yujahiduna fi sabilillah. They strive, they exert themselves for the sake of God, in the way of God. وَلَا يَخَافُونَ لَوْمَةَ لَائِمٍ. They're not afraid of critics. ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَن يَشَاءُ. This is God's grace, His mercy, His virtue, and He grants it to whoever wants it. وَاللَّهُ وَاسِعٌ عَلِيمٌ. And Allah is expansive, meaning He gives it to anybody who wants to come. He's not going to hold back. And Alim. And He's all-knowing in a sense that He knows exactly who deserves this sort of grace and kindness. So what we see here is maybe this is the time where Allah has brought a new group. We see a lot of individuals who, let's say, grew up in a certain faith. Maybe they grew up Hindu, Christian, Jew, whatever. And then they come to learn about Islam. We have a lot of reverts or converts or those who've come to Islam, let's say post 9/11, and after they've recognized that modernity doesn't solve their problems, or they've seen how chaotic post-modernity and the current world is. And they've looked at other ideologies and they found that Islam is the only coherent one. Islam is the only ideology and the philosophy which ties in human reasoning, which ties in science, which ties in the value of the individual, which ties in the value of society, which truly has a good definition of freedom, of liberty, of compassion, of mercy, of justice, of all these ideas. Where everyone else has a fake, deficient version, Islam gives the real definition in the complete version. So people have researched and they found out that this is the source of truth. And that's why they've come to Islam. Many Muslims as well, who maybe were non-practicing when they were younger, or because of a weaker upbringing or a disinterested life, they have become what we call, born again Muslims. Right? And many of you know, myself, I was in the same sort of boat. Right? I wasn't so super religious or interested when I was younger. Then I, was blessed to be able to find the right scholars and be pushed in the direction of finding good researchers and speakers. And then religion started to make sense to me. And a lot of other individuals who, let's say, may have fallen prey to the arguments of atheists or modernists or postmodernists, now, after having realized that, no, Islam has answers for all these issues, they have come back to the fold of Islam. I have yet to see any of these issues that an atheist or a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu or a Sunni, I've yet to see an issue that's been brought up by them that hasn't been in a satisfactory way, in an adequate way, answered by the Quran, the Ahlul Bayt, through our ulama and our scholars. This is the beauty of the path of the Ahlul Bayt. Alayhimus salatu wassalam. Salawat. So I think for us, one thing that we can look at is these factors and these traits that Allah mentions for these new groups, and see that, hey, for some of us, maybe we don't have these traits. It may be a good idea for us to focus on these things that Allah is mentioning in this verse and see if we can start to act like this and practice this. So the first was what? The first was mutual love. That was the first trait that Allah mentions about this new group of believers. See, mutual love, meaning Allah loving you and then you having that love for Allah, that mutual love, that leads to true, sincere action and dedication. It's different than the sort of laziness and complacency and indifference that sometimes you and I have when it comes to prayers or azadari or reciting Quran or following the various rules of Islam. The second is that they are humble towards mu'mineen. Again, us sort of born and raised Muslims, sometimes we are so arrogant when it comes to other Muslims and other mu'min. Traditional religious people sometimes are the most harsh, the most judgmental. We suffer from compound ignorance, right? Because we think that we were born into it, that somehow we know everything about Islam. And many times I see people, right, where even if, let's say, they're given a source of, a fiqh ruling or a historical idea, whatever it is, they just don't want to believe it because, well, I was raised a different way and I learned something else, So they don't want to expand their minds. People are unwilling to learn. But you see these born again Muslims or reverts or converts humble themselves, especially in front of the mu'mineen, and are always willing to learn. And maybe it's perhaps because those, let's say, born again Muslims or reverts, converts, whoever it is that is this new sort of group, they have a lived experience of being lost. They knew what it was like to be misguided and on falsehood. So now when they come to the truth, they have what we call spiritual empathy. They can relate to somebody who currently doesn't know what they're talking about and is ignorant. They say, you know what, I understand that. So I'm not going to be harsh with you. I can understand. I used to be in your shoes. People who are harsh, they're unable to empathize with people like that, unfortunately. So for all of us, this is definitely another trait that you and I need to work on. Be humble with your community members. If somebody in your family or one of your friends or another community member still is not practicing, they're still failing in their religious journey, it's okay. Everybody has their own journey. Harshness is not going to help them out. It's not going to help you out. And that wasn't the way of the prophets and imams. So why bother? The third quality was that they have a dignity. They're dignified and they're staunch against the kuffar. You see, when it comes to people, the enemies of Islam, enemies of religion, atheists, materialists, people who are secular, liberals, this is their society. We are in the minority. Even among religious people, we're in the minority, right? Even among the various religions, Islam's in the minority to some degree. Among Islam and Muslims, Shias are in the minority. Among people who are practicing Shias are in the minority, right? So we're like multi-level down being a minority. To be able to defend one's views with passion and conviction is something that you and I need to work towards. There's a reason why if you come in contact with a vegan, they will speak in such a way that will say, how dare, they'll say like, of course I don't eat meat. It's so disgusting. How could you do something like that? How could you disrespect animals? They speak from a place of confidence. But when you and I are questioned about our beliefs, we start acting like cowards, right? If somebody says, hey, do you want to come out for a drink? Or, oh, you want to go get high? Or whatever it is. You want to come to the club? I'll say, oh, I'm so sorry. I can't do it. My religion doesn't allow me to. I wish I could. I really want to, but I can't. It's such a disrespectful way to speak about the religion. See? If we understood how detrimental, all of these sins are, there's a reason why God says don't do them, then we wouldn't be coming from such an apologetic place, such a reactionary, defensive place, right? In the same way, other people, like atheists, can be so militaristic. Vegans can be so militaristic. Why can't we be strong in our beliefs? Why is it that people who now are freshly into Islam or born again people are so strong and staunch in their faith? Because they have that conviction and that drive that sometimes you and I don't have. And we need to make sure we get that sort of certainty so we can defend our faith in the same way. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And the last two quickly are that you're striving in the way of Allah, right? Yujahidun fi sabilillah. That all of our efforts are for God and for God alone. Meaning, when we do something, we're not doing it for our own ego, not to make yourself happy. You're not doing it even to please your family. You're not doing it to please the community. You're not doing it to please and serve your country. Nor are you even doing it for this vague idea of being a human being and doing it for the sake of humanity. A Muslim does things for none other than the sake of Allah. Now, of course, does Allah want us to serve humanity? Does He want us to serve our family and community? Yeah, of course. But the way we get our answers, the way we know what to do is for Allah. Everything goes back to Allah. So even when we see, for example, the Ahlul Bayt, when they answer, when Bibi Zainab, alayhi salatu wassalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, when she's asked about why she has love for her father, right? When Imam Ali says, why do you have love for me? He says, I have love for you because it's what Allah commands. It's because it's what Allah wants. See, for the Ahlul Bayt, everything is Tawheed centric. Everything is God centric. Even their love for their family. And this is something that you and I also need to work on. Constantly striving to make our lives purely Islamic. Tawheedi, Tawheed centric. As we've been saying, living an Islamic lifestyle. And then the final criteria is that Allah is saying, don't fear critics. Yes, sometimes even the worst comments will come from within our own communities. Sometimes even fellow Shias, fellow community members, your fellow family members will insult you, they'll make fun of you because you decide to practice more than they do, because you're doing certain things that everybody else thinks is ridiculous. Well, guess what? That's too bad for them. You happen to be blessed with that information about the Ahlul Bayt. You have an access to truth that they haven't been privileged to access yet. That's okay. No problem. Right? Allah says, you say salam alaikum, leave them at peace. You do what you have to do. Don't let other people's insults tear you down. If somebody calls you an extremist or a traditional or conservative, they tell you, be more moderate, lighten up, live a little. Say, look, I am living a little. I'm living exactly the way that I need to so that I can have a beneficial afterlife. You can do whatever you want. And I'm going to do whatever I feel based on my research is beneficial for this life and the next life. No reason to be harsh with them, but at the same time, don't get, if you actually know what you're doing is based on the truth, then it's okay. If people are judgmental, if they criticize you, there's no problem. If you have done your research properly, and you know what you're doing is correct and right, then there's no reason to fear what critics are saying, whether they're within our community, outside of our community, other schools of thought, or even atheists or others. Don't worry about them. Do your research. Stick to your path. God, inshallah, if we are truly striving for it, He will guide us and give us the tawfiq for what we need to accomplish on our spiritual journey. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So we'll take a pause here now. So we've talked about the history of what happened in Europe leading up to what's going on right now, people abandoning the truth. And we talked about the two different trends. People either abandoning the truth and going to postmodernism and just fighting for whatever they want using power and force and systems, or some people who have turned back towards God, toward metaphysics, towards philosophy, towards religion. A question that I'm sure has occurred to most of you is, okay, this was happening in Europe, and now this is happening in pretty much the Western world. During all this time, what was going on in the Islamic world? What were Muslims doing? We always hear about this idea of the Islamic golden age and Islam and science and all this stuff. Well, what was happening then? Inshallah, when we reconvene in a few weeks, that will be the next subtopics, the next set of subtopics that we will go through, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, just forgive me, I just want to take a few more minutes, just say a few words about Eid al-Mubahala. Then we'll go on and see if there's any questions on Slido. Maybe we'll take one if there's anything, and then we'll go on to the quiz. So, obviously we know what Eid al-Mubahala, what it represents. I want to use Eid al-Mubahala as a thinking point and a connecting point for the month of Muharram. And we talked about this before as well, right? Last time we talked about how we need to adjust to this new situation in our lives with Corona, with social distancing, and we have to adapt to what's happening. And we shouldn't fear that. Azadari has been evolving ever since the time of the Imams. One message which I think is very important from Eid al-Mubahala is this, is that sometimes the strongest community, or the only community that you need, is a strong family. Sometimes we don't need to look out to our friends or our extended family or other community members or society or our country or anything else. Sometimes all we need is our family, assuming that our family is on the right path and they have that love for Allah. This is what we see with the Ahlul Bayt, the Ahlul Kisa. These 5 individuals are able to stand against all of humanity, against all of falsehood, against everything else which represents that which is undivine or ungodly. In this Muharram, many of you will be looking towards trying to find some way of connecting with the community. And I understand that. We talked about this. But remember, if your family is strong enough, then that's all you'll need. If your family is connected to the Ahlul Bayt, then that's the only spiritual energy that you'll need to rely on. I know you want to have all these gatherings. You want to hold majalis. Remember, the Ahlul Bayt show us the smallest example of a true Islamic community, a true Islamic family. If you want to have house majalis, fine. Realize that you can accomplish this message and spread the message even within your own family, and there's nothing to be ashamed of for that. What's interesting is with Mubahala, with Hadith al-Kisa, with everything, we see that the actual function, the main nucleus in the source is who? It's Sayyidatun Nisa al-A'lameen, Fatimatu Zahra alayha salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli. And so this message I'm specifically giving and as a humble advice to all the women. I know what azadari you're used to. I know that you're used to having these house majalis and jumping around and getting involved in having these sisters only sessions. Please keep in mind that although it's a wonderful thing that you've been setting up before, really think about, is this the right time to continue those sort of sessions? You women are the source of spreading the message of the Ahlul Bayt. You are the nucleus of the family. When you decide to hold gatherings which may not be safe, which may be putting other people in danger, think about whether this is something that Bibi Zainab alayhi salam really wants. Think about whether Bibi Zahra really wants something like that to happen. Would she and would they really want their Shias to be put in danger? When we can organize our sessions without having them in person? Just think about that. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying think about it. You can decide better, but just realize it's in your hands. you can adapt in the same way that the ladies of the Ahlul Bayt did, and inshallah, hopefully you make the right choice this Muharram. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay, let's see. If there's as maybe one question on Slido, we can take that. If not, we'll go on to the quiz. Okay, what was the first in all this religion? Islam. Right? It's Islam. It's always been Islam. How do you recognize the truth? There's a lot of ways of recognizing the truth. There's your fitrah. Sometimes your fitrah can recognize the truth. You can use human reasoning sometimes to recognize the truth. Sometimes science can help you do that. The prophets will speak to the truth that lies within us. It really depends on what thing you're talking about. It's a really broad and vague question that, unless you give me specific examples, I can't really, mention there, right? Why do you believe that 2 + 2 = 4? Why do you believe that there's only one God? Why do you believe that the Quran is the word of God? You need to look within yourself and realize what that is, right? We have an intellect that God has given us, but that intellect is not just about human reason. It's not just about using science. It's also about using those God-given internal systems, the fitrah that we have. Okay, so let's jump on to Slido for the quiz, inshallah. Oh my God, what kind of names are these? Okay. Assalamu alaikum to everybody. Wow, these are some very interesting names tonight. Let's just get started. I don't think I can, I don't know if I want to even go through some of these. Pretty funny, but okay. Let's just get the quiz started because I think we're already over time. Okay. So, Allama Amini, Qaddasallahu sirru, in his 20-volume work, Al-Ghadir, offered proofs, bringing proofs for Al-Ghadir based on what? On the Quran, Sunnah, and intellect, the Quran, Sunni narrations, and Shia narrations, the Quran, Sunnah, and poetry, or the Quran, Sunnah, and science. So this was one of the questions that I wanted to bring on Ghadir that unfortunately I didn't set up properly, so I figured I'd bring it tonight. So we didn't discuss it, but I figured, let's see if everybody knows. And the hint, for those of you who may know, hopefully you don't cheat, but the hint is actually in the title of the book itself. So no Googling. Let's see. Uh-oh. So the name of the book is Al-Ghadir fil Kitab wa Sunnah wal Adab. Al-Ghadir, meaning proving Al-Ghadir through the Quran, Al-Kitab, wa Sunnah, and wal Adab, in poetry. So this is one of the crowning achievements of Allama Amini, rahmatullah alayh, is that in addition to using besides the Quranic proofs and looking at Sunni narrations primarily, he also looked at poets throughout history who have all been talking about Ghadir. This is one of the crowning achievements of this wonderful 20-volume work. Okay, next question. What is the issue with using the scientific and empirical method in trying to understand reality? Is it the limitation in scope that it only looks at the material world? Is it a limitation in conclusions that science can't lead to certainty? Is it that it's heavily influenced by political, philosophical, and ideological agendas, or all of the above? Hasan, all of the above. Very good. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Why do we do tawaf counterclockwise, or for you non-North Americans, anti-clockwise? Is it because God said so? Because we're just copying how the prophets before, alayhimus salam, have performed it? Because we're imitating the actions of the angels, or all of the above? This is something that we mentioned last Thursday. Sons. 64% of you got it right. It's all of the above. Very good. Right? God obviously said so. We're copying the previous prophets, right? In addition, it's also that we're imitating the actions of the angels as they go around the Bayt al-Ma'mur on the fourth heaven. So it's all of these. Ahsant. And here's the final one. Here we go. The main idea of postmodern thinking is that truth comes from power, comes from groups, does not exist, or all of the above. And as you're all answering that final question, once again, Eid al-Mubahala Mubarak to you and your families from our family. May Allah strengthen our families and connect us and make our connection with the purest family stronger. Next week is Muharram. It's one of the best ways to connect with the Ahlul Bayt. So let's utilize this new method of azad, the socially distanced azadari, and strengthen our connection to the Ahlul Bayt. There, may Allah accept all of your azadari in that in these upcoming months. And may Allah bless all of you who will be reciting poetry, be sponsoring the majalis, listening to lectures, whatever it happens to be. Okay, we're missing? Come on. Yeah. I tricked you guys. It's all of the above, right? They believe that truth doesn't exist, that it does come from, so the only way you get truth now is from power, right? Is that you just make whatever you want to be true, right? You force people to believe your truth, and you can use groups. You trick or convince groups of your truth through power. So all of these are correct. So this was probably the first time I tricked you all because pretty much all of the aboves were correct. Let's see if we've got any first. Oh, so no 4 out of 4s, but to the Jessas and ST, congratulations. 3 out of 4, not bad. Once again, Eid Mubarak to all of you. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala Ahl Baytihi at-Tayyibin at-Tahirin. We'll see you all in a few weeks. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Iltimas dua.
والسلام عليك يا رسول الله محمد وآل محمد صلوات صلوا على محمد मुकस्सिरों को मैं यूं भी सजाए देता हूँ मुकस्सिरों को मैं यूं भी सजाए देता हूँ मुकस्सिरों को मैं यूं भी सजाए देता हूँ गली गली में अली की सदाए देता हूँ गली गली में अली की सदाए देता हूँ और अली के नाम से जब जब खुशी मिले मुझको अली के नाम से जब जब खुशी मिले मुझको मैं अपनी माँ को हजारों दुआएं देता हूँ मैं اپنی ماں کو ہزاروں دعائیں دیتا ہوں. افضل السلام والسلام علیک یا رسول اللہ محمد وآل محمد صلوات صلو علی محمد. ہمت تھی کس میں درے خیبر کو کھارے انتر کو کرے زہر اور مرہب کو پچھارے گیوار میں لیٹے ہوئے اجدر کو بھی بھارے ڈوبے ہوئے سورج کو جو مغرب سے ابھارے یہ کون عجائب کا مظہر کون ولی ہے یہ مولا علی مولا علی مولا علی ہے یہ مولا علی ہے یہ مولا علی ہے. کعبے میں ہے مولود کے سی پی میں گوہر ہے یہ نور کی بارش ہے کہ حوروں کا سفر ہے دیوار بنی در یہ تو حیدر کا اثر ہے مکے کی فضاؤں میں بھی پھیلی یہ خبر ہے کس نور سے ملنے کو چلا نور نبی ہے یہ مولا علی مولا علی مولا علی ہے یہ مولا علی ہے یہ مولا علی ہے. کعبے سے امامت کی کرن پھوٹ رہی ہے ہلچل ہے ملائک میں کہ صف ٹوٹ رہی ہے کفار و منافق کی کمر ٹوٹ رہی ہے مکے کی زمین در نجف لوٹ رہی ہے قدسی کی صدا کعبہ فلک صرف یہی ہے یہ مولا علی مولا علی مولا علی ہے یہ مولا علی ہے یہ مولا علی ہے. اونٹوں کی قطاروں کو جو خیرات کیا ہو سے روزوں کی جو نان جمی بخش دیا ہو سائل کو رکوع میں جو انگوٹھی کو دیا ہو شب روز یتیموں میں غذا صرف کیا ہو حاتم ہے خجا یہ تو سخی ابن سخی ہے یہ مولا علی مولا علی مولا علی ہے یہ 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 مولا علی مولا مولا علی شیر خدا لا فتح الا علی لا سیف الا ذوالفقار یہ مولا علی مولا 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 علی ہے. افضل السلام والسلام علیک یا رسول اللہ محمد وآل محمد صلوات صلو علی محمد.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاري والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأسلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة. لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرزي الزكي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبيابكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي. وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. بأبي أنت وأمي يا ابن رسول الله. بأبي أنت وأمي يا أبا عبد الله. جناب علي الأكبر. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. زيارة شهداء كربلاء. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباء. السلام عليكم يا أسوياء الله وأوداء. السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الزكي الناصح. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله. بأبي أنتم وأمي طبتم وطابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما. فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. زيارة أبو الفضل عباس عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوسيين. السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلاما وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأحوتهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواسي. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام، فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدافع عن أخيه المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب فيما زيد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل، والحقك الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم. اللهم إني تعرضت لزيارة أوليائك رغبة في ثوابك ورجاء لمغفرتك وجزيل إحسانك، فأسألك أن تصلي على محمد وآله الطاهرين، وأن تجعل رزقي بهم دارا وعيشي بهم قارا وزيارتي بهم مقبولا وحياتي بهم طيبة، وأدرجني إدراج المكرمين، واجعلني ممن ينقلب من زيارة مشاهد أحبائك مفلحا منجحا قد استوجب غفران الذنوب وستر العيوب وكشف الكروب، إنك أهل التقوى وأهل المغفرة. السلام عليكم يا صائر الشهداء جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا حجة الله يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله لك ما وعدك من النصر وظهور الأمر ورحمة الله وبركاته.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا.